Why don't we go ahead and get started? I want to thank you all for coming tonight. We're kicking off the kind of the second public outreach portion of the Uptown Jefferson specific plan process. I see some familiar faces of folks that participated in the our visioning workshops, which were held about 9 months ago, or completed about 9 months ago. And we've been busily working on the format and the framework of what will ultimately be a specific plan that will go to the Planning Commission and City Council, and also we're also working on an environmental impact report, which will accompany the specific plan. What we're doing in this case is we're doing what's called a program EIR, which will allow for it basically will analyze the ultimate build out under the proposed plan. And by doing that, it actually helps projects that come in after the plan is adopted. It helps them get through the environmental process. For large-scale projects, it can actually reduce their processing time by a year to a year and a half. So it is a significant economic development incentive. And it's what we did in Old Town, and it's really helped spur the development that you've seen in Old Town in the last 10 years. So again, my name is Patrick Richardson. I'm the city's Community Development Director. And the Community Development Department is overseeing the preparation of the specific plan. We have a steering committee of the three commissions in the city: the Planning Commission, the Traffic Public Safety Commission, excuse me, and the Community Services Commission. First, I'd like to introduce the primary key staff on this. Luke Watson is the senior planner that's overseeing the project. Luke's in the back. Raise your hand. Katie Ennis is the actual project manager, and you've met both Luke and Katie through the process. Also, Dale West in the back of the room. He's one of the project planners that's helping write the specific plan. We have Jerry Gonzalez, who I don't believe is here, but he's the traffic engineer that is in-house traffic engineer, as well as Annie Bostry-Lee. She's also a land development engineer. And last but not least, Barbara Smith with our Community Services Department. This is an official meeting of the Uptown Jefferson Specific Plan Steering Committee. What we did was, in order to, we have, other than the City Council, there are 4 citizen boards that are appointed by the City Council. The Planning Commission, which is a 5-member body. All these bodies are 5 members. Planning Commission, which reviews most development activity. The Public Traffic Safety Commission, which deals with all of our public safety issues and traffic issues. And also the Community Services Commission, which provides direction to the Temecula Community Services District. There is a 4th commission, which is the Old Town Local Review Board. But they are only dealing with issues in Old Town, so that's the reason why they're not part of this subcommittee. The other 3 commissions deal with everything citywide. So we have 2 members from each of the 5-member commissions here tonight. So what I'm going to do official housekeeping, we'll do a meeting roll call, and if you could just say here when your name is called. Carl Carey. Here. Pat Kite. We know Pat's absent tonight. Bob Hagel. Here. Bob's with the Public Traffic Safety Commission, and Carl is with the Planning Commission. Gary Yeomans. Here. And Gary's with the Public Traffic Safety Commission. Michael McCracken. Here. He's also with the Michael's with the Community Services Commission. And Felicia Hogan. Here. With the Community Services Commission. At this point, I'm going to introduce Katie Ennis, who is our project manager for this project, and she'll basically kind of guide you through what we'll be talking about tonight.
Thanks, Patrick. So we have a pretty busy agenda, 7 items that I'd like to go over. First, I'm going to recap the visioning process feedback that we received during the 9-month process, and I'm going to go over the 8 visioning recommendations that came out of that process. Number 2, I'll provide an overview of form-based code principles, discuss an overview of the plan administration, an overview of the draft district map, building heights and residential density that we're anticipating within the specific plan area, and also go over the build-out scenario and the assumptions that we used to come up with the numbers that we came up with, and last but not least, go over the project schedule and discuss the future steering committee meetings that will happen in the future. So just to give you a little bit of background, this is the Uptown Jefferson specific plan area. It's located immediately north of Old Town, north of Rancho California Road, west of Interstate 15, south of Cherry Street, and east of Marietta Creek. It's about 560 acres, and Marietta Creek runs through the specific plan area to the west, and the Marietta Creek area will be maintained as permanent open space as part of the zoning. As far as the character of development within the area right now, it's primarily suburban, very auto-oriented, and primarily commercial development. So no residential, no mixed use currently exists in the specific plan area to date. Wanted to run through the specific plan process summary, just to give you an idea of where we've been with the process and where we're going. So as Patrick mentioned, we conducted a 9-month visioning process with 6 workshops from October to July of 2012. And in August of 2012, so almost a year ago, City Council authorized staff to begin preparing the Uptown Jefferson specific plan based upon the vision that came out of the visioning workshops with the community. So since August to date now, staff's been developing the specific plan framework, and so we'll be presenting that framework to the steering committee as we develop it. And the steering committee meetings will happen from July to January of 2014. So during the visioning process, we asked the community, where are we now? And where do we want to be in the future? And that gave us the vision. And so we took the vision and basically came up with an implementation framework and strategies, which will set the foundation for the future Jefferson specific plan. So just as a reminder for those of you who came to the visioning workshop, I know there's a number of new people in the room. This is a visioning process timeline. So workshop 1, we talked about the existing conditions, the overall vision that the community foresaw, the area's opportunities and challenges. Workshop 2, we talked about urban design and placemaking. Workshop 3, we discussed the conceptual districts. Workshop 4, transportation and complete streets. And workshop 5, we presented the summary of the market analysis that was done by Kaiser Marston. They are economic analyst consultant, and they came up with a market study. So we presented the findings of that study. And workshop 6 presented the overall vision that came out of the 5 visioning workshops and the policy recommendations. As far as the workshop attendees and stakeholders, we were represented by a large cross-section of the community, including property owners, business owners, interested community members, residents. We had students from some of the local high schools attend our meetings, real estate brokers, people and staff from the Convention and Visitors Bureau, Chamber of Commerce, staff from RTA, and local bike advocacy groups, as well as local developers and various commission members. So that's kind of the cross-section of the people who attended our meetings. So jumping into the feedback that we received during the visioning process, which is probably a recap for some of you. We heard from the community that they wanted to see the Uptown Jefferson specific plan area become an exciting destination, a place where people wanted to live, shop, work, and play in a livable urban environment. They wanted to see the study area organized into districts or villages, because it is a relatively large area. It's about 4.5 times the size of Old Town. They also wanted to make sure that the area complemented Old Town and the Promenade Mall. The community also wanted to see an expanded mix of uses to activate the area by day, night, and weekends. They wanted to see a mutually supportive mix of uses, including commercial, residential, tourism, recreation, and arts-oriented uses. And of course, a theme that kept coming up over and over was the need for jobs and to expand the professional employment opportunities that exist right now in Temecula and the surrounding area. And of course, the big one, improving regional and local mobility. During the visioning process, people, of course, wanted to see a reduction in traffic congestion. They wanted the plan to provide strong vehicular and pedestrian connections, expand walking and biking opportunities for people, and also to look at the viability of transit as an alternative to cars. So getting people out of their cars, walking, biking, and using transit. The community also told us that they wanted to see the city allow an increased building height and development densities, and they wanted to see us capitalize on the community's openness for change to see something happen within the specific plan area. They wanted us to allow for greater development and land use options, and also to be sure that as we develop the specific plan that we're ensuring the financial viability of the increased density and intensification. Another theme, green spaces and Marietta Creek. The community told us that they wanted us to capitalize on Marietta Creek, which is to the west, the future trail system that is planned as part of the Riverside County Flood Control Project, and also to look at the detention basin that's located in the northern portion of the specific plan area as a potential for a future recreation area. They wanted us to look at orienting future development toward the creek to kind of create something special along the creek side to balance the urbanization of the area with the natural environment. And some more specific comments that we got, they wanted to see us provide green spaces and energy regeneration on the rooftop spaces. So with that, I'm going to recap the 8 visioning recommendations that came out of the visioning process. What we did, we took all of the comments that we received back from the community and kind of condensed them down into 8 visioning recommendations, which you probably remember from the meetings that we held previously. So recommendation 1 was to strengthen economic development, and our goal is to spark the revitalization of the area through comprehensive economic development strategies that will support a sustainable fiscal future. Recommendation 2, looking to expand the mix of uses, and our goal is to allow for greater flexibility in the uses, a wider array of land use options within the specific plan area. Recommendation 3, define districts and neighborhoods within the larger specific plan area, and our goal is to encourage the definition and development of districts within the area based upon current historical uses in order to cultivate unique character within the specific plan area. Recommendation 4, improve transportation, mobility, connectivity, and circulation. And so our goal is to encourage the development of a multimodal interconnected circulation network that will improve circulation for all modes of transportation, so vehicles, bicycles, pedestrian, and people using transit. Recommendation 5, integrate recreation, open spaces, and trails within the future urban development. So our goal is to encourage public and private investment in the development of a world-class walking and biking trail system, public open spaces, and active and passive recreation spaces. Recommendation 6 is to utilize a specific plan to create updated and flexible development standards. And our goal is to create urban development standards that will guide the future development of the area, but still being flexible enough to adapt to the changing market conditions and economic conditions that could potentially happen over the next 30 years. Recommendation 7, build and maintain a comprehensive utility infrastructure system. And our goal is to ensure adequate utility infrastructure capacity to support the future urban development that could result as a part of the specific plan. And last but not least, recommendation 8, to establish a district identity. And our goal is to establish a recognizable identity, experience, and brand for the specific plan area. And so those recommendations went to City Council, as I mentioned, back in August of 2012, and the City Council authorized staff to begin preparing the specific plan based upon those recommendations. So just kind of to make sure that we're all on the same page, what is a specific plan? It's a written planning document that's used by a variety of different people, property owners, business owners, city staff, and other decision makers as the guide for future development. And it's a tool that puts the community's vision into action. So how are we going to get to the vision 30 years down the road? And specific plans typically address the type, location, and intensity of development. They address development character, design, and building form, the different land uses, infrastructure and circulation improvements that are needed to support the future development, and also a financing plan. And so the Uptown Jefferson specific plan, we're intending it to be a form-based code. And form-based codes are unique because they foster predictable built results and a high-quality public realm because they emphasize the physical form of the building rather than focusing on the strict separation of land use. They also address the relationship between the building facade and the public realm, which includes the sidewalks and the street. So how do the buildings relate to the street? The specific plan will specifically address those types of issues. They also address the scale and type of streets and blocks and provide the regulations and standards in both words and clearly drawn diagrams to help facilitate development and make it a little bit easier to understand what exactly is it that the city would want. So this is an example sketch of the character of development that we might end up with once the specific plan is implemented. So a lot more urban. The buildings are pushed up to what we call a build-to line, and that's how they kind of frame the street, the sidewalks, and the public realm. So jumping into an overview of the plan administration, the future specific plan, as we administer it, is intended to allow for a greater flexibility in land uses and allow for a wider array of development options. Some key concepts, we intend that the plan implementation will be market-driven, that property owners will not be forced to change the use, buildings, or development on their property as a result of the specific plan, and new development or revitalization would occur when an owner chooses to pursue such changes. So when a property owner finds that it's economically feasible for them to change the use on their property, the specific plan is a tool to allow them to do that. So the draft districts map, building height and residential density. This is our first shot at the draft districts map. We've identified 6 different districts within the specific plan area. So starting from the southernmost end, we have the Urban Hotel and Tourism Center. Immediately north of that, the Creekside Village, shown in green. The district immediately east of the creek is the Urban Arts District, shown in, I guess, kind of a peachy orange color. Uptown Center, shown in pink. The Uptown Sports District, shown in blue on the northern end. And the Marietta Creek Recreation and Open Space District, shown on the north and west of the specific plan area. And as far as the land use mix that we're anticipating, we do anticipate that the zoning will allow for residential and mixed-use development to be permitted throughout the entire specific plan area. Jumping into the building heights, we are anticipating or targeting a 4-story building height within the entire specific plan area, with the exception of the Uptown Center, which will target about 5 stories. And we also are anticipating allowing for developers to go above that target height in any of the zoning districts. And we're working on some incentives to maybe encourage that type of development. So looking at the Uptown Center going up to 8 stories, as well as the Urban Hotel and Tourism Center, again at 8 stories. 5 stories within the Creekside Village and Urban Arts District, and 6 stories in the Transit Sports District. The residential density, we anticipate a range anywhere from 20 to 60 dwelling units per acre, but we're targeting 45 dwelling units per acre kind of as that midpoint in the range. And jumping into the specific plan build-out scenario, this is the total specific plan build-out capacity over a 30-year time frame, and these calculations are based upon the anticipated number of buildable acres within the specific plan area. So we have calculated about 2.2 million square feet of commercial development that could be possible based upon the capacity within the area. a little over 4,500 residential dwelling units for a total development potential of 11.8 million square feet. And we came up with these numbers, or the buildable acres, by netting out Marietta Creek, because we don't anticipate any development happening there. We assumed 30% of the total gross acreage to be dedicated to future streets and alleys, and we assumed 50% of the remaining acreage to be dedicated to either surface parking or structured parking, and we didn't count that 50% in the total development potential. We also assumed a target floor area ratio of 2.0 for all of the districts except in the Uptown Center, where a target FAR of 2.5 was assumed, and the FAR of 2.0 correlates with a 4-story building, and the target FAR of 2.5 correlates with a 5-story building. So we made sure that the floor area ratios and the building heights that we're anticipating match with one another. We also assumed a target residential density of 45 dwelling units per acre, so at that target. So jumping into the project schedule and the future steering committee meetings. This is the overall project schedule. We are anticipating holding steering committees just like this from July until December. We have 6 meetings planned, including this one. And we are hoping that we'll have the draft specific plan and EIR ready to go in late December of 2013. Having that document, specific plan document, and the EIR ready for Planning Commission in early January of 2014, and getting the specific plan and the EIR to City Council for approval in late January of 2014. So, as Patrick mentioned, this is, we're just starting out in the process again, going back out to the public, starting on the steering committee meeting. So we have a little ways to go, but we'll get there. So this is the steering committee schedule. As I mentioned, we have 6 meetings scheduled over the next 6 months. So our next meeting will be August 28th, and we will discuss in more detail the districts, land use, and development standards. In September, we'll talk about the public realm. In October, we'll talk about mobility, circulation, and congestion management. In November, a little bit more detail about the plan administration and the sign standards. And in December, wrapping it up with infrastructure, CIP, capital improvement projects that could potentially be slated for this area, and then the plan financing. And then hopefully our goal, January 2014, to have the specific plan completed and the EIR ready for certification by the City Council. And before I close, just wanted to mention and make you all aware that the project website is still going to be up and running during the steering committee process. If you haven't visited the website, you can access it at envisionjefferson.org. And if you're not able to make any of these future meetings, this will be a great tool for you to use. We'll post all of the videotapes of the meetings, the presentations, the meeting agendas up on the website, and kind of keep you apprised of the process as we move forward. And with that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Katie, it's been an interesting process, but what I was curious about, I missed the developer forum, and prior to that, there was no specific districts that created densities that were, and it seems like since the 6th meeting, the developer forum, somebody has put a pencil to the area, put densities to specific areas. Who did that?
Well, we're looking at the density range to cover the entire specific plan area. So the density range of 20 to 60 dwelling units will be applied across the board. We haven't developed it specifically for each individual district.
And height requirements, you had certain areas that had 8-story maximums, other areas that had 5 stories with a target of 4. Who determined those areas?
We looked at those numbers, planning staff, and we based them upon Kaiser Marston's market analysis. Looked at the numbers that Kaiser Marston came up with and kind of projected out what type of development we might end up with, and kind of coordinated the building heights from there.
Yeah, and those are the build-out scenarios, the building heights. part of the process that basically what we heard is part of the visioning process. As some of you remember, there was an economic analysis workshop that talked about, based on market conditions, both now in the midterm and in the long term, what our economists felt that were reasonable development build-out scenarios, and then we modeled that and came up with these proposals in terms of density. There's a number of other resources that we looked at. We looked at our experience in Old Town. The residential development that's occurred in Old Town on the east side of the creek is around 60 to 70 units in the acre. That's a mixed-use commercial. So in what we heard from the visioning workshop is that the vision for Jefferson is that it be a more urban type development along the lines of what's happening in Old Town, maybe even a little bit more urban than Old Town. And in order to achieve that yield of development, that's where we came across. We basically, from a recommendation standpoint, rested on that 45 units per acre. That's in stone as part of the meeting. It's one of the reasons why we're having these meetings, to get feedback from the public as to their feelings about that. There's another component too. Our general plan and our housing element talks about what used to be the old redevelopment project area. When we approved our housing element and it was certified by the state in 2009, we agreed to adopt what's called an urban density overlay zone, which was coterminous with the old RDA boundary, and that was a minimum density of 30 units to the acre. So what this does is that it basically meets that requirement, but it also allows, with the experience that we've had in Old Town, that going higher than 40 or 30 units or 45 units or up to 60 units to the acre, it still is a reasonable density. I think what we found in Old Town is, if you ask people, if you look at the buildings on Fifth Street, you look at the new buildings on Third, the one that's finished and the one that's under construction, most people wouldn't realize that those are 60, 70 units to the acre, but they are. And so you can, the density issue, we're fortunate to have Old Town as somewhat kind of like our, for lack of a better word, a laboratory that we tested a lot of these hypotheses and we see that they work. And so we envision that Jefferson, being that next area for development after Old Town. So Old Town is confined. There's only so much area in Old Town. Like Katie said, the Jefferson plan is 4.5 times larger than Old Town. So it has significantly more developable activity. I think in the Old Town specific plan, we looked at a maximum build out of about 2,000 or 2,500 dwelling units and a total square footage of about 4 million square feet. So it's a more compact area. Jefferson allows for more opportunity because of the larger area, the larger lot sizes, and things like that.
Yeah, assuming approval in January, when did you expect Jefferson construction to be?
It will depend on whether or not we get development proposals to come in under the new specific plan. The timing of that would depend probably on the economics of the market, but people would be able to come in, as soon as a specific plan was approved and the EIR was certified by council.
And we think the timing is good. The economy is on the uptick. We're seeing one of the Roger asked me, are we busy? We are crazy busy right now. We have we're processing probably not including Jefferson and not including Old Town, probably about 2,000 dwelling units right now. There's about 1,500 that are already entitled and under construction. some infrastructure improvements in Jefferson to serve as somewhat of a demonstration project. I think many of you have been in the valley a long time. Remember what the city did back in the early 90s when they redid the sidewalks in Old Town? That's the plan, that we will do something similar like that, at least on a segment of Jefferson, to let the development community know that the city means business. We want to see this area develop. The other thing that we intend to do is use some of our remaining redevelopment money that we have in the Jefferson area. There's not a lot, but there's enough to maybe do a project or two that will help spur development by seeing that kind of the same model that we did in Old Town. And like I said, we're fortunate because we have a lot of history and we have a lot of experience working. You know, it took a while to get Old Town kickstarted, but once we did, you can see what happened in the last 5 to 10 years. So we want to build on that. Old Town is basically probably going to build out, I would say, within the next 15, 20 years. And I think it's just going to be a natural progression to the north. People are going to want to be, especially that southern end of the specific plan, where we have some existing hotels right now. That's very much related to Old Town in terms of people can walk there. We'll have new residents that will be living in that area. One of the things that we heard in the visioning process and also in talking with the new owners of the Firestone property, there's a real possibility that if these plans are all put in place and they're built out, you're going to see a full-service grocery store on this side of the freeway. Because between Jefferson, Old Town, and what they're proposing up there, you're looking at about 10,000 dwelling units west of the freeway. And you're going to need a grocery store. You're going to need a lot of commercial uses that abandon this area because all the development that occurred on the east side of the freeway. So it's going to be, and it's going to be a new type of development. So if you're living in the east side and you have a single-family home, but your kids are graduated from college and started their lives, and you decided that you don't want that 4,000 square foot house any longer, but you want to buy an in-town condominium, we're going to create a new kind of, the development community is going to create a new type of development that will appeal to a broad spectrum of housing buyers or renters that it doesn't exist currently in Temecula right now. And what we're hearing from the developers is that there is a strong demand for that, and the signs are encouraging. Keisha?
I think one of the keys to the employment is education. We need higher education because that attracts business
Actually, that is probably going to happen much sooner than any of us thought, maybe 6 months ago. Part of the requirement for developing up on the old Firestone property is the construction of the western bypass. That includes a bridge across Marietta Creek. We have seen preliminary plans that they have, that they understand that that's going to be a requirement. The alignment of the western bypass has changed. Can you put up the map of Jefferson? The previous alignment of the western bypass basically connected at where the ARPA station is down there, went across what we call the escarpment, fairly high on the escarpment, and then actually there was supposed to be a bridge over Rancho California Road. It was supposed to go behind the industrial park and then connect at Cherry Street, which would then eventually connect to the French Valley interchange. Because of the cost and also concerns about really tearing up the hillside, we have come up with an alternative alignment for the western bypass that essentially still crosses at Marietta Creek. It actually hugs the hillside at a much lower elevation, so it doesn't, the grading is substantially less than what was previously envisioned. And then the western bypass will then swoop down to Vincent Moraga, which is basically the southern end of Diaz, and then it will connect to Diaz Road. Here we go, Vincent Moraga to Diaz Road, all the way up to Cherry. If the developers of the former Firestone property have their way, it'll be in the construction funding in the next 5 years, if not sooner. So that'll be a major north-south connection that doesn't exist right now. Also, the city of Marietta will probably break ground before the end of the year on the connection of Jackson and Diaz. That's a fully funded project, an approved project. So really, within the next 3 to 5 years, you'll not only have the two north-south street connections, but you'll also have the French Valley interchange as well as the ultimate 79 South interchange rebuilt.
Katie, you mentioned that a lot of the businesses that are in there right now are related to auto, and there's a lot of warehouses, schools, supply parks, and that type of thing. As we transition through this, where do those businesses go? Is there other locations within the city of Temecula that is zoned and there are buildings or buildings that we built to house? Or do we, as citizens, do we go elsewhere, go to Marietta and have our parkers or wherever? That would be, I think, one of the challenges is they serve a purpose, and it's not, it's not like antique shopping where you can do without it. You need to have your car fixed, you need to have certain supplies, you need to have certain mechanical things done, and that's our place right now. And as thrilled as I am to see it change, that's something we still need.
They would be able to stay under the new specific plan until they chose to change to something else. And when that time came, all of the property that is, I guess, west of Diaz Road is zoned light industrial, which could accommodate those types of uses.
The steering committee, when do they meet? When do they discuss all this stuff? And are we invited?
Of course.
Yeah, okay.
Going back through the schedule, steering committee meetings should happen about once a month. So this is the schedule, and yes, the public is invited, and then we'll also have our representatives from each of the commissions
In fact,
as well.
this is a steering committee meeting.
That's my question. So is the steering committee going to discuss anything, or is this just a presentation on the
No, that's basically this portion of the meeting to discuss what we're trying to encourage is basically we'll tell you where we are in the plan or how we're developing the plan, and we want to
haven't quite gotten there yet. We're still working on them and trying to figure out what makes sense to encourage, development to become more urban.
One of the incentives that we did in Old Town that we'll probably analyze as part of this is parking reduction. That basically in Old Town, as many of you know, commercial and office development does not require parking. You can build a brand new building. In fact, the building at Second and Mercedes, there's no parking in that project. And that was put in place as an incentive to get people to develop. The trade-off on that was the city was to build public parking garages, which we built the one that's attached to this facility. That was really our plan is when we had a redevelopment agency. The state dissolved redevelopment agencies. Redevelopment agencies were a primary tool for cities to build infrastructure that was basically funded by property taxes that were generated in the project area. We're going to look at that model for Jefferson. There are a few things that are floating around in Sacramento right now. Instead of coming, basically reinstating redevelopment, what a lot of the discussion is creating a form of tax increment financing that would basically be limited only to infrastructure. So what you would do is the cities would have to adopt an infrastructure improvement district where the property taxes that are generated in that district would then be used for road improvements, parking structures, and there was actually one bill that was passed last year in the legislature when the governor vetoed it. In his veto message, he said, I support it. He supported the concept. He just wanted to get through the whole dissolution of redevelopment. So what we're hearing from our assembly and legislative leaders in Sacramento is that there's probably going to be something put in place that will allow cities to finance infrastructure, and that would be a goal in this area as well. So that would be one incentive. The other incentive that we're looking at, if you look at the target densities and the floor area ratios and building heights, it's certain kinds of development incentives that will allow you to build a floor area on your property by, let's say, you were able to consolidate a greater building area based on, if you had a half acre of land or you had an acre of land, you may be limited to 4 or 5 stories. But if you're able to assemble, 5 acres of land, you may be able to go up to 8 stories. So that's an incentive there. And then you also might get a parking incentive as well. So there are various things that we're, I don't want to sugarcoat it. The amount of incentives that we have in our toolbox are not what they used to be. Redevelopment, I think Temecula, some of you may know that a lot of the infrastructure in the city was built through the redevelopment agency. The interchange at Winchester and the freeway was basically constructed, which facilitated the mall being developed. The bridge over Rancho California Road, all the improvements in Oakland, the Overland Bridge, our senior center, many of the public improvements that you've seen that have occurred over the last 15, 20 years were basically funded by the RDA. That went away in 2011. Hopefully there'll be something put in place to replace it, but focusing it just on infrastructure, not on providing help or financing assistance for commercial development for infrastructure.
I was wondering if you were sensing pressure to increase the density or decrease density, or if you have a sense of what that was that we're seeing.
What?
Based upon the existing density
right
now.
Are you sensing that people want you to scale back on the density, or are you feeling pressure to increase density?
I think right now we're kind of at the midpoint based upon the visioning feedback that we received. these are, the density range that we came up with, 20 to 60 is where we think we should be as far as the feedback.
That, in the visioning meeting that we had last summer, people were talking about 20-story buildings, and one guy wanted, 100 units to the acre. And, what we want to make sure is what we bring to the city council that gets adopted is something that can actually be implemented. So to say that we're going to allow 20-story buildings in this area, that may sound good on paper, but our economist says we'll ever build a 20-story building in this area. And really, is it really consistent with the character of development that you see in Temecula? We see this as an urban area, but it's still Temecula. It's not, it's not San Diego. It's not a large city. So that as Katie said, what we tried to do is come back with urban development standards, but standards that we believe that the market will restore. And that's one of the reasons that we had a developer forum a month ago.
Right about a month ago.
And we had 4 developers, different types of developers, residential, commercial, office, hotel. They came in and they're from all over Southern California. They've done successful projects throughout Southern California, and we had them critique what came out of the visioning process. And what they said was that they were very impressed with the fact that we had done a market study and that we were developing a plan based on a market study, not on some idea that a planner had that, hey, let's put a 10-story building here, and let's do this, let's do that. We want to make sure that what the plan calls for is economically viable. And the other thing that we heard was, the densities that we're proposing are good, but they also said that if somebody wants to come in and build a project that is less than 30 units to the acre, you may want to look at doing that. And that's why we have that range from 20 to 60 to the acre. And like I said, in Old Town, we're fortunate because we have projects that we can actually go out and look and see and touch, and we know what those look like, and they're at those density requirements, and people are comfortable with that.
Could you comment on the details of the new owners versus old owners of the property? You're talking about this side of the freeway would have a possible commercial market, and is there going to be, for example, tract housing on the west side now?
Well, I think there's going to be development by merchant builders. You're not going to see large lot single-family homes. You're going to see multifamily townhomes, row homes. You may see some small lot single-family development, but we have plenty of single-family development on the east side of the freeway. What we're looking at is multifamily, attached single-family, small lot single-family, stacked flats, lofts, things like that. And given that concentration of rooftops, if you have 10,000 households, that's basically what you need to have a supermarket. And so, again, this is all market-driven, but what we're hearing from developers is that if you put 10,000 new households on the side of the freeway, people aren't going to go across the freeway to their homes. They're going to want to have their own market. And, we have a whole residential area on that hill that in Duluth that will also come down and utilize the goods and services of these new businesses there.
But will those be custom homes on acreage, or will those be tract homes? That's because there are no tract homes on that.
Well, Duluth, that's different. Those are large estate properties. These are going to be production housing. It's not going to be
That was my
estate
question.
homes.
Regarding the Firestone property, and I heard a specific plan mentioned. Is there a schedule on when the steering committee meetings will start on that, or is that different since it's a single ownership?
That will have a different process. There won't be public meetings. That's in the very early stages. I would venture to say that they are working on a land use concept right now that they probably will be submitting to the city by the end of the year. And then that will start the process for entitlement, which will probably be a 2-year process. And during that time, there will be public outreach. But it won't be, it's not a city-sponsored specific plan. It's a specific plan much like Roripa or will create our harvest mandates, the development driven.
Patrick, the development will proceed basically based on the private sector's response to market demand for the most part, but the Marietta Creek, that's obviously a public project. What is the perceived schedule for the Marietta Creek improvements, and how does that tie into the Marietta Creek potential improvements?
That project is moving forward. I can't give you a specific time frame, but I think it's based on feedback that I've been given by the Public Works Department. At least what we call phase 2 of Marietta Creek, which is basically through Old Town up to Winchester. Could very easily happen within the next 3 to 5 years. So the cities of Marietta, Temecula, Voldemar, along with Riverside County Flood Control District, have agreed to take that project back from Army Corps of Engineers, and there's support from them to do that. And that way it'll allow the local jurisdictions to fund the improvements.
And would that project be tied timing-wise to the specific plan we're talking about, or is that going to proceed basically independently?
It's going to proceed independently.
Okay.
Yeah, the Overland Bridge extension project, I know that they're going to level down some businesses to get through. Will that be a physical bridge across? They'll want to have access to like Enterprise and those types of streets where it hold up. And how many lanes is it going to be?
4 lanes. It's in 2 phases. What they're doing right now is phase 1, where they've acquired, I think, all but one of the properties. Probably in the next 12 to 18 months, those properties will be torn down, and they will actually construct from Jefferson to the creek. That's phase 1. Phase 2 is the bridge across Marietta Creek. They will start design on that probably in the next 2 years. The actual construction of that will be based on funding.
Is the market analysis that we've done, is that for public consumption? Can you access that?
There's actually on the website, there's you can actually look at the workshop that we have and the presentation of the being like that.
Patrick, you mentioned from Marietta, Washington, coming through, you're talking about connecting with Diaz.
Yeah.
And that's something they're now interested in doing.
Well, they're not. They won't. They haven't. They know that we think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
There are some there that do
a lot of people that have heard of us, but we travel all over the world, and a lot of people don't know we're here. So I would hope that you would include that if it gets passed on to the economic development department, or there's something in the plan to have a marketing plan to attract.
I think that's a great idea. I think we should consider an economic development component. I do know that the city used to go to national and regional conventions to market the city. This plan, I think, will really be conducive to that, because one of the things that we have talked about in the visioning process for demonstration projects, where a good example is the old State and Leather Shopping Center. You know, if we could get the property owner to work with the city, go to an ICSC and say, here's a site that's available, it at least gets our name out there, lets people know that there's areas that are available. I think that's an excellent
And
suggestion.
invite us. We do that for appointments. We invite the businesses we want to attract here. We don't wait for people to find us. We seek those people out and schedule things at the ICSC event.
I actually have attended ICSC with the cities and have visited the booths and invited the retailers out. What I do understand is so much of it is still demographics. Like, we couldn't get a Nordstrom's here, but we were able to get a Nordstrom's rack. The grocery store actually needs 53,000 to serve, to be profitable. We have grocery stores now that are running at a loss in this area that we're going to lose when their leases expire. So we have a lot of strategic planning to do to attract the businesses, and the city is doing a very good job. But I like your suggestion, and I think it's a good thing to get to work on. If you could identify those trade shows that you're aware of, we could get the list to the EDCs and support their efforts to attract.
Yeah, I'm sure we know what those are, that they're seeking out the businesses that do know what those are, and that there's money allocated for the market. I think that's a good point. A really good point.
And that's an excellent idea. I know before we started this process, 2 years ago, Urban Land Institute came out and did what they call a technical advisory panel, where they came to this area, people from all over Southern California and out in the United States, and we did a bus tour of Jefferson and also Temecula, and what was so striking was people who have never been here were so impressed, and that they were like, I never knew this was here. You know, some of the comments that I remember one lady saying, I feel like I was just airlifted and dropped from Orange County in here, and I'm still in the same place. So, you know, with if we get people here, the community tells the story, and people get excited. So I think that's very valuable.
Sir, do you think getting that information would change the aspect of the whole project? Because you said before, a 10-story building, to who would build that, but if you're marketing to a company that would build that here, does that become viable now, or is it still, because what I hear a lot is a lot of duplicating Old Town, which is good, it works in Old Town, but if we're trying to make a unique experience up here, to me, it's always been a corporate focus. Put some corporate buildings, whether they're 8 stories, who cares the stories, put some corporates in there where we get some businesses in town.
Yeah, I don't think and when I talk about Old Town, I'm not talking about Old Town in terms of what we're envisioning for that area. I'm talking about that we went through processes that were similar in order to get the plans in place. Old Town is going to be distinctively different Well, I would say that our economic development department does actively seek businesses of that size to come in. There are some challenges that we need to overcome. One of the things that we're not located to a major airport, kind of in between.
French Valley.
And so, like I said, if Qualcomm wanted to come up, what we've been trying to do is convince a lot of those folks, companies and people commute south into San Diego, that their employers to come up here. And we're starting to see new homegrown businesses that are growing and expanding. So it's just, there are some limitations that we certainly are out there beating the drum, letting them know that we're open for business and we're welcoming. But we also want to be realistic as well.
Are there any similar plans to this for Tower Plaza area?
Not right now. Actually, our general plan calls for that area. I would say that area, the old Target Center, is probably the next specific planning that we'll probably do after Jefferson. That also, the general plan is called for it's a mixed-use overlay. Yeah, it's a mixed-use overlay. We've actually been talking with some developers about that retail that's all vacant behind where the 24-hour cities used to be. Actually, removing those buildings and building residential back there. We've had several developers approach us. So I think that's probably the area that is probably next to finalize. Any questions or based on what you heard today, or is there anything that seems a little too wild-eyed, or we're kind of way off the base, or maybe we should go back and rethink?
The only thing that has popped into my mind and has been eating at is that's a lot of commercial space in a very short, small region. And we've got probably 8 years of absorption before we can even fill in what we have available to us. So to add more to that, that concerns me. How much do we have commercial in-ground right now? The total building square footage in the specific plan area is about 3.8 building square feet. Okay, so what you would propose would be new then?
Yes, so
Because you are proposing 2,280,000.
yeah, so the build out assumption assumes that everything on the ground would go away and be replaced by that 2.2 million square feet of commercial versus residential.
Okay. That's, some of the businesses that we have so much competition already. What more do we need that using our here? So that's my only thing is the additional commercial space.
Yeah, the other component, a lot of the square footage is supposed to build out into residential.
Okay.
Do you guys want to put it on the districts now or at the next meeting?
The next meeting we'll get into kind of the nitty-gritty of the districts.
Just want to throw out there's 6 hotels currently in the area, 1 proposed, and the hotel area only has 3 of those 6 proposed, the hotel district. So there's 4 other hotels that are outside of that hotel district inside of Jefferson.
And even though that's a hotel, we're calling it a hotel district because
receptive are the owners in that area?
You know, well, the owners actually, the receptivity of the owners in the district has been almost 100% supportive of what we're proposing. It's, the meetings that we had last summer were very well attended. It included both property owners, some of the businesses. A lot of the property owners are also business owners in there. And so we were pleasantly surprised that there was a lot of support for what was being proposed. The people saw that there may be the potential for greater development in that area, understanding that it's going to happen over a 20, 30-year period. And if you come back 30 years from now, I mean, you're not going to see the area.
Won't be around in 30 years.
You won't see the area completely transformed. You'll see, you hope to see a lot of the development that has been envisioned as part of the community. Any questions or? Larry?
Real quick, your beginning is used getting housing authority money into this area once the plan's done.
Well, the money that I was talking about, the former redevelopment,